It's time to get your music radio ready with the Audio Skills Podcast. It doesn't matter what type of music you're creating or what gear you use. It's all about the technique. Get ready to turn your home studio into a place where your music goes platinum. Now give it up for your host, Scott Hawksworth.
Hey, what's happening, everyone? Scott here, bringing you a new episode of the Audio Skills Podcast. I'm really excited about today's show because we're going to be talking about home recording with a Nashville-based singer-songwriter and recording coach named Katie Heath. But before jumping into that, it's time for your audio tip of the week. My tip this week has to do with frequency masking issues and how to address having problems with separation between your tracks. You know, when you are mixing or producing, inevitably you will run into those situations where certain tracks compete for the same frequencies. This especially can happen with similar instruments, say multiple guitars, but it can also happen just because of how frequencies naturally work. Vocals can compete with guitars and so on. So here are 3 quick tips for dealing with that. Number 1, learn your frequencies or at least have a chart handy. There are so many great tools out there to tell you where an instrument's frequency spectrum is, including areas that are critical to its tone, so use them. I'll include a link to my very favorite frequency chart in the show notes today. Number 2, make use of EQ flipping or swapping. Now, this is a technique that's great for instruments that are very similar. And basically what you do is you make opposite moves or EQ curves for each instrument. So, for example, if you're making cuts at 1K for one instrument, consider making boosts around 1K for the other. The idea is that this can really help those instruments stand out from each other. Third and finally, don't be afraid to EQ in mono. I've given variations of this tip before, but when you're struggling with instrument separation, making it even harder on yourself by removing the stereo field option can actually help you make bigger and more impactful EQ moves. So do try it out. And that's your audio tip of the week. All right, I am now so thrilled to introduce Katie Heath, who's going to be helping us explore ways to get better results from home recordings. Katie is a singer, songwriter, home recording coach, and owner of Katie Heath Studios based in Nashville. Katie, welcome to the show.
Hey, Scott, thank you so much for having me.
Right on. How was your Thanksgiving? Did you eat a bunch of turkey and see family and all that good stuff?
I did. I'm really lucky. My husband's parents and my parents are great friends. So we just did it all together at my mom and dad's house and just had a grand old time. It was great.
That's awesome. That is what the holiday is all about. Well, to start us off, could you just tell us a little bit more about your career in audio and the things you're working on today? And really maybe just a bit more about this thing called Your Song Journey, which is a course you offer.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I'm based here in Nashville. I have a studio here. I do some co-writing and some producing for other people, but right now I'm mostly just focused on my next EP that I'm working on. It's going to come out later this month. And
Awesome.
yeah, I'm really excited. It's about time. But also, like you said, Your Song Journey, that is my baby. I just love it so much. I've really fallen in love with the education side of things in music and in audio, because it's just so cool to be able to help people who are where I was not too long ago. So that is who I created Your Song Journey for, artists and songwriters who just want to make better recordings from home. So maybe they want to put out their next EP, or they want a better demo for their songs, or they want to do YouTube covers, whatever it is, but they just feel held back because their recording quality isn't what they want. So I made that course just for them, because really I was making it for my former self, I guess, because I struggled. But when I broke through and just really got a hold of this production thing, it was just so empowering for me. I love it so much.
Absolutely. That is what it's all about. That's what Audio Skills is here for. And it's so awesome. Things like Your Song Journey, which really help people learn the skills, because that's truly what it is it's a skill and it's techniques. And that's kind of what we want to dive into a bit today. We want to talk about getting great sound in a home studio, something that you've been successful at doing. And so my first question is about monitoring. And one of the biggest challenges in home studios is that they often aren't ideal for monitoring. I talk about we work in imperfect spaces, and they may not be treated. They may not have the ideal shape or layout. You may be working in a place where it's like, well, I'm kind of in my bedroom and I have a bed over here. Um, so what advice or tips, Katie, might you have for people to overcome these kinds of challenges as it relates to monitoring? How is your monitoring set up, and what advice might you have for folks?
Yeah, I would say just use whatever you have at your disposal. If the budget's not high, if there is no budget, just get a comforter, put up some curtains. I've seen people use mattresses. Like, I've seen everything. Now
Hmm.
I have some custom made panels that are in my studio that a guy over in East Nashville made for me. And I love them because my studio is what I like to call Echo City. This the space that I'm in, it's 1950s sheetrock walls. You can barely get a nail in there. It's hardwood. So that was my biggest issue in my home studio. It was just the echo. It was crazy. So I was really happy when I was able to get these panels because they do the job and they're pretty, which is
Yeah.
nice. But I would say just never let anything like your space hold you back, because I've seen people do incredible recordings in a space that you would not consider ideal at all. I really don't even get too technical as far as having bass traps and having the perfect setup and how everything's positioned, because I had a conversation with a mentor of mine one time, and he told me the story about how this guy was going to see this producer mixer that did all the mixing for a lot of Disney projects. This guy
Hmm.
was like famous in his world.
Right. Yeah.
So he goes to this guy's studio and he's expecting to see this grand, incredible setup. And it's just a dude in an empty room with his laptop, and he's got some headphones on. He has like one of those folding tables. Like, it's nothing. It's just a dude in a room, and but his results are there. So I would also just tell people, get to know your monitors and use referencing. So if you use referencing, you can tell if, hey, maybe your monitors come out a little bit bass heavy. Maybe there's not enough bass. And using referencing can kind of help you identify the quirks that your monitors have, and you can just work around that.
Absolutely. And then one thing I might add to that as well is just having something like, if you have a car with a good sound system, you know, after you're done with your first pass of your mix or whatever, take it out to your car and listen to it there, and see if it's working, and then go back. I mean, a lot of it is just a matter of iterating and just working within your space. And then the beautiful thing about ears is that you can start really knowing your space, and knowing the pain points, and like you mentioned with yours, like knowing, okay, we've got echo issues, so I need to tackle this, and approach this, and keep that in mind when I'm working on my music. So I think that's really, really great advice, to not get so wrapped up in it, but realize it's a process.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, kind of speaking of processes, workflow in a home studio is so important, especially when you are, musician, producer, engineer, songwriter, all wrapped into one. What's your general workflow when it comes to recording a song? So let's assume you've written it. You like what you've written. Now it's time to get to recording.
Yeah. I love to start with arrangement. So maybe not super, super in depth, knowing exactly how things are going to go, but at least the general flow of the song, how I want things to be structured. I really like to work through that and kind of have almost a map to
Okay.
work from. And then when I get to recording, I love recording in sections. That works so well for me. So I usually just start right from the beginning, and I just get that intro, maybe that first verse sounding good, sounding how I like it, at least like 75%, 80% there. It doesn't have to be super polished, but it's like, okay, I like how this section is feeling. Now, where can it go? How can I do something different? in this next section, where can I take it, but still keep it cohesive?
Hmm.
So that's kind of my general plan. And then when it comes to just tracking, I usually start with keys because that's my main instrument. And I just kind of fill it out from there, supplement it with maybe some guitars, some pads. Love to do my drum programming, but
Oh, you got to do it.
oh yeah, I love it so much. But I wait a little bit to do that till I kind of get a vibe going,
Hmm.
and I get my drums in there. And then later on, it's just, doing your hooks, your decoration, the extra ear candy.
Absolutely. And just to go back when you were talking about arrangement and kind of the map, I mean, is it something you write out, or kind of how do you get that? Because so many people are like, I have all this stuff in my head and I can hear it in my head, but I can't get it down, and I don't even know how to make that map.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of times I'll just chart it out. Not always. Sometimes it'll just almost be like a bullet point list. If I've got the chords really solid in my head, I don't even need it. I'm just like, okay,
Sure.
so I want to do verse 1, and I want it to grow here, and then I want to go into the chorus. Maybe I know that chorus is going to be a down chorus. It's really
Hmm.
just structure and like, where do I want that to be dynamically? I'll figure out, how do I want to transition from one section to another. So either just bullet points or just a straight up chart is how I usually do it.
I really like that too, because I think that so many people, when they get frustrated, it's because they go in and they don't have, of course, you want to be creative and want to be able to explore different things and try different things. But if you kind of go in with no plan, you're kind of aimless sometimes, and it can be overwhelming because it's like, I have this idea, but I have no idea what to do with it. So I really like how you kind of map things out, or you're doing bullets or things like that. So you at least have some kind of framework. Do you find that really helps you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I'm just a planner by nature too. So it was bound to happen with me for sure.
Right on. So, okay, and I think this is kind of connected to what we're discussing here. I get a lot of feedback from listeners and subscribers that one of their struggles is motivation and efficiency. And motivation, because again, they have all these great ideas in their head, but they're like, I can't take that first step or whatever. Do you have any tips or advice for overcoming this and getting motivated to really get those ideas down and get the recording done and things like that?
I would say just listen to music that you really admire and that gets you fired up. And then just believe that you're capable of making something
Mhm.
like that. I have a Spotify playlist called Inspiration. I just put all my favorite tracks on there, and I just play it, and something will happen in the track. And I just go, oh my gosh, that's sick. I love it. I love it. And it just gets me excited. And I just want to hit the studio and see what I can create and just imagine that moment where I'm playing my track back and I'm just in love with it, you know? You got to get that
Yeah.
that excitement. For me, that's where the motivation comes from, and just having fun. And I would say, for people who are still kind of maybe in that beginner, intermediate level, still, it's half fun, half struggling, just know
Mhm.
that it gets better the more that you do it, and that frustration element gets lower and lower, and the fun just gets bigger and bigger. So it's absolutely worth the investment in just learning and growing.
I love that, and that's such great advice, because one of the things that, I've had struggles with and I've been frustrated with, you can, I don't know, you're working on a song and it's like, oh man, I just can't get this EQ right, or the sound isn't just what I want. And that can be draining. But then having something to remember, hey, why do you love music? Why are you even doing this? And what are the people making the music that really, really inspires you? Being able to go back to that and just kind of zone out and rock out or whatever, and then really recharge your batteries, I think is so powerful. So that's a really, really great piece of advice there. Now, my next question, nobody's perfect. We all make mistakes. I don't care if you are a multi-Grammy winner. You will inevitably have made mistakes in your career when it comes to audio or anything like that. Katie, what's the biggest mistake that you've made when recording or mixing a track, and what did you learn from that mistake?
Oh man. Well, I don't know if I have any, like those epic fail moments where,
Sure,
I just
sure.
lost the whole project or like, didn't hit record. I can't think of anything like that exactly, but I do know that when I go back and listen to some of my old tracks, like it is hilarious. Like just seeing how far I've come and how much I've grown. I would say if I had a biggest mistake that I could pinpoint, it would just be like not taking things far enough. Like early on when I was first learning, I just, like we talked about drum programming and how much I love
Yeah.
that. Well, there was a time where I didn't even really consider the possibility that I could maybe do that because I'm not a drummer. You put me in front of a drum set, it's going to be bad. It's going to be really bad. But I didn't understand that it's still possible to make great drum tracks, even if you're not a physical drummer yourself. So some of my old tracks, like they just have copied and pasted drum loops and just sad. And I look back on it, it's like, oh, Katie, come on. Like you didn't even know, like you had so much more in you. So I would say that's probably my biggest mistake is just, not taking it far enough.
Sure, sure. That not believing that, hey man, I could do this. I can do this. And I have that ability in my head, even if I'm not using a traditional drum set, I can get great drum sounds out of programming it, right?
For sure.
So, okay, moving on to vocals. And this is a big pain point for a lot of people, especially in the home studio environment. Do you have any tips or advice for recording and mixing vocals that sound professional in a home studio? What should artists focus on to really get that clean, beautiful vocal sound that the pro recordings that we all love
Oh yeah.
have?
Yeah, that I love that you asked this because this is probably my favorite topic. I love vocals. I'm a vocalist. I mean, I've been singing as long as I can remember, so it's huge to me to get a
Sure.
great vocal, and I'm really picky about it too because of that.
Right?
What I've come to learn is that the biggest thing you can do is just focus on getting a great performance. And my whole method that I do of recording in sections, I definitely do that with my vocals also. So I'll just
Mhm.
pick a section and then just get a bunch of takes of that. Not too many because then you get editing overwhelm. Usually maybe like 5 or 6 for each section. So like verse 1, chorus 1, bridge, whatever it is. And for me, that's helped me get a much better performance because I used to try to do the thing start to finish, but then you get to chorus 3 and you're just starting to feel a little bit out of breath. It's not as strong as your first chorus and you want to hit it hard at the end. So just from a
Sure.
stamina perspective and really honing in on the performance, the emotiveness for that section, I would say recording in sections is huge, getting a good performance, and also editing. Editing is a big deal.
Your vocal comps.
Yes, put together the best comp that you can. Just take the time to learn your tools so you can clean up the pitch, the timing. It doesn't have to be robotic, but you want it to have excellence. And I think that polish is really what separates a pro vocal from an amateur one.
Absolutely. And when you're recording, you mentioned you do it in sections. So you do like the entire verse, or do you ever find yourself like, okay, I just want to get this phrase and I want to do that? Or is it always like, okay, I'm just gonna do 5 versions of verse 1 and I'm gonna choose and mix and match or whatever the best from that, or how do you do it?
It's usually just that whole section because I find that I get the emotiveness better when it all flows together, but then sometimes you just get a trouble spot and you're like, "Well, dang it, I can't get this." So then it's
Yeah.
totally fine to go back and punch in. I absolutely do that too.
Absolutely. So, okay, of course, gear isn't everything, and I am constantly triumphing that message because I think a lot of people, especially if they're starting out or maybe, they have budgets, they feel like, well, or really the gearheads sell the, I think, myth that you need to, well, if you didn't buy a $3,000 pair of studio monitors, you're not going to get good music. And that's just false. But that said, gear is great, and gear can help you. It's the tools that can help you get great sound. So, Katie, I'm wondering, do you have any, big recommendations for affordable gear that gives you a ton of bang for your buck, or even just the gear that you use? What's your gear setup? What do you have?
Yeah. So I guess I can kind of go over my setup a little bit. And you're right, gear is so much fun, but the crazy expensive stuff isn't necessary. I mean, I'm running a 2011 MacBook Pro. I just upgraded to a solid state hard drive and 16 gigs of RAM so that it could do what I needed it to do. But I mean, this thing is 6 years old and it's my baby. It works great. I
It's
run
your workhorse.
right. I run Logic. I run Pro Tools on it. Those are my two main DAWs. Probably my favorite piece of gear is my Apollo Twin Duo from Universal Audio. It's my audio interface. And
Hmm.
and I love that thing. And it came with some great plugins too, which doesn't hurt. I just love Universal Audio as a company. But before I had this one, going back to affordable pieces of gear, I had a Scarlett 2i2, like from Focusrite.
Oh yeah, that's a classic.
Classic. It is not expensive and it did a great job for me. I had it for a long time. And, right now, like the way technology is, it's just crazy how good it is. So even the things that aren't that expensive, the quality level is just like, crazy. So you don't need that super expensive studio setup to get great results. And you don't need a ton of gear either. Like for me, even now, I still have two microphones. That is it, two. And that works for what I need because I'm mostly just recording myself, other solo artists doing songwriting demos. I'm not really the person that you would go to if you're a band and you need to
Right.
track drums and everything. So like I know what I do, what I enjoy doing, and I just get the gear that works for my
What
situation.
what two microphones are your guys?
Just the classic Shure SM57
Boom.
and
Yep.
then a condenser mic from Studio Projects. I think it's the B3. It's like $150. Not expensive, not fancy. I love it.
And see, and there it is right there. And you're able to make such great music just with those tools. And so again, folks out there, here's the proof that you don't need to, of course you can build out your microphone locker. And I do encourage you, especially if you're working on, you want to record bands and you want to do these different kinds of things. Yeah, that can be great, but don't feel as though it's like, well, I just need to save up a couple grand and get 15 microphones and all this kind of stuff. Like, no, you don't need to do that to get your great sound. So that's really awesome. Now, let's move into mixing a little bit. And I first want to start with compression. And compression is something that a lot of people struggle with. I get questions about this all the time. Do you have any tips or techniques for getting better results with compression? Do you have any moves that you like to make that seem to work really well within your mixes and things like that?
Yeah, for me, compression was probably the most mysterious thing. It's like, what is it doing? I don't know if I can even hear what it's doing. I definitely had a lot
What's
of
a knee?
yeah, exactly. Oh, the good old knee. And so there really are so many knobs when
Yeah,
looking at a compressor. The EQ is a little bit simpler in the way that it's set up. So you just see all these things that you can move and change, and there's so many combinations. But for me, I really like to just do extreme settings for my attack and release just to help me hear what the
yeah,
compressor is doing. Because with anything in production, especially when you're trying to get a compressor to do what you want it to do, you got to use those ears. So any advantage I can give my ears, I do it. So then that kind of gives me a good indication of which way I want to lean for attack and release. And because with compression and again, really anything in production, it's so much just about working with the specific instrument that you're trying to mix,
right.
in EQ, in compression, it's just like, okay, what's going to be best for this specific voice or this drum kit or this guitar? So for me, the guiding principle that I always go by is what sounds good. And I don't care if it follows the rules or if it's what you're supposed to do. If it sounds good, then that is what I what I go for. And also sometimes with compressors, I'll stack them, especially on vocals, kind of split the load a little bit. It's another little thing I like to do, and that helps me a lot.
Absolutely. And I just kind of had some thoughts. First of all, I love what you said about kind of making a big, more extreme move to make sure you're hearing what's going on and then adjusting. That was actually, I think, last episode, or maybe the previous one. My audio tip is that I think it's very helpful to, make the extreme move to start and then work backwards and say, okay, is this okay? How do I now fold this in and blend it in?
Right, exactly.
So yeah, so that is just absolutely huge. And then for stacking compressors, that is something that a lot of pros have told me and championed. And the idea that, if you want to take, 40B off or whatever, well, it can be helpful to split that into two compressors doing two, and it just for whatever reason, and like so many things in audio, you don't need to necessarily understand all the science behind what's happening. It's just, as you said, Katie, if it's sounding good, and it kind of makes it a little easier, and it kind of eases it in, I guess, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. It makes perfect sense.
So, okay, and you kind of covered this as well because you were talking about compression, but also EQ. But do you have any other advice or tips for getting good results with EQ? How do you achieve? So many people talk about struggles with separation between their tracks and getting, having it so things aren't crowded out. Do you have any advice for that?
Yeah, a lot of that is just, I would say, understanding that frequencies compete. They're shoving each other around. They're jockeying for that position, and masking is going to happen if you're not aware of that. So the best way I've found for me to work in and kind of combat that is just start by EQing the most crucial elements of my tracks first. So I'll solo up my first one, kind of make some moves, add in maybe my next most important one, and see, hey, are they playing nicely together? How's this working? Is there any masking happening? And then if there is, I can kind of make decisions on what I can carve out, what moves I can make to eliminate that. Because so your instruments are going to be competing for that space in the EQ spectrum, but they don't need all of it. Everybody has their nice home where they sound really nice. So it's like a puzzle piece. I would say, like putting that puzzle together of, okay, how can I cut? What is this? What's going to happen if I do this? That cause and effect, and just kind of being mindful of that and understanding that. So for me, logically, it just helps me to do it piece by piece and do the important ones first, and then protect them as I move further into the mixing process.
Absolutely. I love that. I think that is such a great approach. And that helps people too, because a lot of people, when they're struggling, they're like, my vocals aren't sitting right. Or they're like, they're crowded out, or da 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 da. If you are starting with something like the vocal, or your lead guitar, or your piano, if it's a piano track, or whatever it is that you're doing, you're already from point one saying, this is what I want to build this whole, my EQ curves around, and my frequency spectrum around. And then you kind of move down and you work on the other things to go back and forth and say, okay, now I'm going to mold this thing as though it's I don't know, a piece of clay.
Yes, yes.
So, okay, we're talking about all these, techniques and pieces of advice. Some people, they just want to get better, and they want to get better sound they want to get better at recording. They want to get better at mixing music in their home studio. And, we live in a very busy world this day and age, and they want to see their results as quickly as possible. Now, of course, some things take time. You have to go through it and learn, and you aren't going to learn how to play a new instrument overnight, and you aren't going to all of a sudden overnight just learn everything you need to know about getting a great mix. But that said, in your opinion, Katie, what's the key to maybe more rapid improvement? How do you what advice would you give for someone who's like, I want to get better as quickly as possible? How do I do that?
That's actually something I'm really, really passionate about because that was my story, just feeling stuck and feeling like I wasn't progressing. And so I would say for me, the answer 100% is learn from somebody who's already been there, who knows what they're doing, who's gone through the struggles that you're dealing with right now. There's
Hmm.
so much helpful information out there. Podcasts like this, just find people that you want to learn from and just soak in everything that they have to tell you, because I really feel like music production is one of those things where it just goes so much faster if someone can just show you how it's done rather
Yeah.
than just beating your head against the wall trying to figure these things out. Because that was me. Like I was stuck forever, it felt like anyway. But I just, for a while, a long time, I didn't feel like I had what it took to do production. So I just kind of tried it on my own, but didn't get serious about it. But then when I did, I don't know, I guess some small part of me was like, no, you can do this. Like, let's see what you're capable of. So
Yeah.
I got a course on music production, and that, like, it was crazy how much it helped me. Like stuff that I would be struggling with for hours, because like you just don't know what you don't know. They would do it,
Hmm.
click, click, bam, and it was like this light bulb. And I realized production actually isn't that hard, like we're not operating on brains or anything here. It's all very, very accessible and anyone can do it. And it just helps so much to have someone to show you how.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, the tools are getting better and better all the time. And, all you got to know is, okay, know what an EQ is, know what it does. And then if you have an example of seeing someone like, here's how I roll this off, and I'm going to add a little top end here because I want to have a little more air in this vocal or whatever. And seeing that process, then you can very easily say, oh, well, I want more air in my vocal, so maybe I'll add some top end. And oh, I like how that sounds. And that kind of modeling is so helpful. And again, just kind of bring it back to what you do, Katie. That's how, your song journey and the things like that are so awesome and so helpful. And for audio skills, that's why I have this podcast, because that's what it's all about. Learning from people who've been there, you know, gone through the swamp and the struggles, and they came out on the other side, and now they are happy with what their sound is.
Yeah, exactly. And I love what you said about just like picking up tips and things that other people do, because it's just like adding another tool to your tool belt, something you can bust out when that situation presents itself. And that really is all it is. Just keep adding to that tool belt. And then soon you're going to find that you have so much to work with and things get so much easier. I love that.
Right on. Well, okay, I've got one more question here. And you are a singer-songwriter, and I always mention that, all the techniques and skills in the world for making great sound won't really help too much if the song isn't so good. I'm trying to be diplomatic with with how I'm saying this. What's your best piece of advice regarding songwriting? What's the key to writing a good song? How do you approach it?
Oh man. Well, I would say it's maybe it's two keys for me.
Hmm.
I'm really big into lyrics, which is funny because that's actually the hardest part for me is getting what I feel like is a great lyric. But I just believe that in most genres, lyrics are so important. And what I've found, the more that I write and the more that I get in the room with people who are just really incredible songwriters, is just to work hard at saying things in a new way, because
Yeah.
it's gonna be really hard to come up with a concept that hasn't been done before. Like if you come up with something, you're either really inventive or it's probably a super bizarre concept that maybe doesn't need a song written about it, because
Doesn't connect quite.
right, right. But you can absolutely find a new way to say things. And that is what just sticks in people's minds and grabs their hearts. So I think that that's so important. And then on the music end of things, I mean, I just love a good hook, an instrumental hook, a melodic hook. So I'm always asking myself, okay, is this singable? someone who's not musically inclined heard my chorus a couple times, would they be able to hum it back to me? And if the answer is no, then I'm going to keep working on it. And that might not be the goal for everybody, but my writing tends to lean more like pop, commercial, and like I said, I love hooks. They're just awesome. So those are the two biggest things for me when it comes to songwriting.
Absolutely. And I kind of want to add to what you just said, because I think it's such a great piece of advice when it comes to songwriting. I'm a huge Oasis fan. They broke up, but I still like them. And their lead songwriter, Noel Gallagher, he wrote, Wonderwall and all that good stuff. And he always says, as people ask, he's like, write a chorus. Just write a chorus. Write something that, people can belt out, and you'd have a crowd and everyone can join together and sing it or whatever, if that's the kind of music you're trying to make, of course. But that is so powerful. And so, Katie, hearing you say that, it's like, yeah, that's absolutely right. And in terms of lyrics, I think that's really awesome. The thing I struggle with is like, how do you not just write a lyric that's like hokey? Like, I don't want to write like a hokey lyric or something that's like too on the nose and things like that. And I think it's just a process of really trying to think outside of the box and think of new ways to say things, as you mentioned, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I love a good lyric, and I really appreciate them because I know that they don't come easy. You really got to tap into that creative side of yourself. And like you said, just think outside the box.
Absolutely. Well, Katie, I wanted to thank you so much for coming on the show today and sharing your knowledge with us and your experience.
Well, thank you, Scott, so much for having me. Like, I had a great time talking with you.
Excellent. And, folks out there listening, if you want to learn more about Katie and what she's doing, do check out her website, katieheathstudios.com. And thanks so much for listening today. And as a reminder, for links and information about today's show and our guest, check out our show notes at audioskills.com/podcast.
Ready to go even deeper with your recording, mixing, and music production? We've got all the info and techniques you need in one place so you can turn it up. Go to audioskills.com and access a huge library of video tutorials and private workshops so you make progress even faster. Come back next week for a brand new episode of the Audio Skills Podcast.